As Jews, we believe that the Torah is timeless and eternal, that it speaks to us every single year and every single moment, offering new insights and perhaps even Super Bowl predictions. For this week, we read about how God brought victory to the Jewish people, lifting us out of slavery, al kanfei nesharim, on eagle's wings, to freedom and to celebration, or let it say Philadelphia freedom. A Super Bowl championship born on eagle's wings over the Chiefs, when in our portion, the judicial system of chiefs established by Moses is criticized and disbanded for a new system suggested by his father-in-law, Jethro, like an outside business consultant brought in to reevaluate a bad team, perhaps breaking that chief's dynasty with a prediction that the Eagles might soar again. Don't use the synagogue money for that. One could argue that this week's Torah portion, Yitro, is the most important parsha in the entire Torah, as Mark was saying during the Torah reading, for it details the giving of the Ten Commandments, Matan Torah, the revelation of God to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, the covenant, the eternal promise between God and the Jewish people, and as we are the people of the book, the Luchot, the two engraved tablets carrying the Ten Commandments and the mitzvot, are obligations and promises that we agree to uphold, to live a righteous and purpose-filled life, to keep Shabbat, to honor our parents, to not steal, to not murder. Through thunder and lightning, with shofar blasts and dark cloud, God speaks to our ancestors. And though the rabbis disagree, did God speak all 10 commandments aloud? Did God speak just the first commandment? I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. Perhaps God just said the first word of the first commandment, Anochi, I am. Or even God just said the first letter of the first commandment, the soundless aleph, perhaps a simple divine breath. Ah. The Israelites heard God at that moment and in unison respond, Na'aseh v'nishma, we hear and we will do. And yet our Torah portion, the most important parsha in the entire Torah, opens with not the words that the Israelites hear, but these two Hebrew words, Vayishma Yitro, and Yitro heard. Jethro, Moses' non-Jewish father-in-law, a non-Jewish Midianite priest, not a Jew. He wasn't freed from Egypt. He wasn't the one who walked through the split sea, who saw the plagues. He is the one for which our most important Torah portion is named. So why is it, and what did he actually hear if the Torah says, and Yitro heard? The opening line of our portion continues this way. Yitro heard how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. The rabbi suggests that this isn't actually the only thing that Jethro heard that brought him to meet Moses and the Jewish people. There's a textual problem here, because at that moment in the Torah, it says that Yitro met them at Sinai. But if you look back a couple of verses, they're not actually at Mount Sinai at that moment. They're still wandering in the desert on their way going from Egypt to Sinai, encamped in a place called Rephidim. So how could it be that Yitro meets them at Sinai when they aren't actually at the Sinai yet? The order of the events in our Torah seem to be out of order. Ibn Ezra, the classic Torah commentator from Spain, follows the rabbinic idea, ein muktam ve'ein meuchar b'Torah, that there is no early or late in the Torah, that the order that we read about the events in the Torah are not necessarily chronological. We may read about it here, but it could have happened before or after, earlier or later in the actual timeline of the Torah's history, meaning that the Israelites' encounter with Yitro could be later, that he met the Jewish people at Mount Sinai after the revelation and Matan Torah, perhaps before the giving of the Ten Commandments or even after, and that's actually what he heard. But his story is placed right here at this moment before Mount Sinai to emphasize a specific point. Yitro appears just after the attack from the Amalekites. Amalek, the most vile and cruel non-Jewish tribe, attacks the Jewish people on their weakest periphery, on the boundary, charging at the injured and elderly, an unprovoked attack from a non-Jew against the most vulnerable in the Jewish camp. And with the miraculous help of God, with Moses holding his staff aloft, the Jewish people prevail. We survive and continue our march to meet God at Mount Sinai. Directly after this unprovoked attack, that is where our portion begins, when we read the story of Yitro rushing to meet the Jewish people, overflowing with greetings, with blessings and suggestions to refine the Israelite leadership structure. Following a cruel enemy and a non-Jewish response, the Torah presents us with the diametrical opposite reaction for the Jewish people. Not attacking the Jewish people, this non-Jew. This non-Jew, Yitro, embraces the Jewish story. He approaches us with joy and with gratitude and with friendship. An outsider who introduces a new type of non-Jew, not an Egyptian oppressor, not a persecutor, not an attacking Amalekite tribesman. In the commentary of Rabbi Shai held on this portion, he entitles it, "Does Everybody Hate the Jews?" The order of events in our parsha, he says, are intentionally jumbled in a very confusing way to teach us a crucial lesson. Where the most used word in the previous story of Amalek is the word milchama, which means war. The most common word in our portion story of Yitro is shalom, which means peace. Not all non-Jews are Amalek, and Jews who will be given the Torah and then commandments soon will have a personal experience and call from God, should not shut ourselves off from the outside world. A personal favorite book of mine is called The Gift of the Jews by Thomas Cahill, who is not Jewish. And I'd just like to read a section of that book from Thomas Cahill, The Gifts of the Jews. Quote, "Our history is replete with examples of those who have refused to see what the Jews are really about, who through intellectual blindness, through racial chauvinism, through xenophobia, or just plain evil, have been unable to give this oddball tribe, this raggle-taggle band, this race of wanderers who are the progenitors of the Western world, their due. Indeed, we can all too easily look back on the scenes of unthinkable horror perpetrated by those who would do anything rather than give the Jews their due. Unbelievers might wish to stop for a moment and consider how completely God, this Jewish God of justice and compassion, undergirds all of our Western values, and that it is just possible that human effort without this God is doomed to failure." End quote. The truth is that there are many Amalekites in our world who, when they meet Jews, are filled with evil. See Kanye West, Hamas, neo-Nazis, and so many more, just to scratch the surface. But the truth is that there are also Yitros in our world, those who come to our support and our aid. So, getting back to the opening words of our Parsha, Vayishma Yitro, what did Yitro actually hear? Was it news of the triumph over Pharaoh, the victory over Amalek, the revelation of God at Mount Sinai? The rabbis are still debating, was it something earlier or later? Was it the military might of the Jewish people? Was it the plagues and the miracles of the Exodus? Was it the mountain on fire in the desert? Regardless, didn't everyone alive at the time also hear the same thing that Yitro heard? Why is it that Yitro was the only one who the Torah says heard it? Perhaps some people hear and actually respond positively as an upstander, and some people close their ears and never hear what's happening around them to the others. Vayishma Yitro, and Yitro heard. The truth is that not everyone will hear like Yitro, but it is up to us and each of us to amplify that message. to reach out to our non-Jewish neighbors, to our coworkers, to our council members, elected officials, faith leaders, and friends. That's what we all have to do. We can't assume Vayishma Yitro, that everybody just hears it and will know how to respond, take steps to respond, and that's up to us. And that's what I've been given the honor to do. This summer, I will be co-chairing Cleveland's Interfaith Israel Mission from the Jewish Federation, focusing on building relationships with Protestant pastors, including inner-city Black ministers, to go to Israel together, to deepen our relationship, to share Israel's story, and for them to hear and to stand with us. Rabbi David Wolpe writes, Jews have traditionally been more adept at identifying enemies than embracing friends. But we've had many friends and allies throughout our history, without whom we would never have survived the onslaught of those who sought to destroy us. The path leading to Yad Vashem, Israel's memorial to the Shoah, is lined with trees commemorating righteous Gentiles who often risked their own lives to save our people. Today, we see many who stand with us to publicly defend the Jewish people and to stand up for Israel, not because it will make them more popular or give them more celebrity. Oftentimes, it is usually the reverse. It's because they are people of conscience. The spirit of Yitro indeed lives in our time. Let us amplify that message so that there will be more Yitros that will stand with us, embrace our Judaism, and advocate for Israel. Shabbat Shalom.